This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Good afternoon, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Thank you so much for joining. This is always a privilege and a pleasure for me to sit here in front of this microphone and for 2 hours explain what's going on with the economy, explain what's going on in the financial markets, try to have some fun with you on talking about the stupid things that our politicians do, but also to really educate you about how you can make more money. And it has been one of the most tumultuous weeks in the financial markets that I've seen in many years. So I think people are nervous. People are trying to figure out what to do. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my money as we watch this roller coaster ride of a stock market. And we're going to try to walk you through this this afternoon in the next 2 hours. And thank you for joining, by the way. We have monster ratings, very good ratings for this show on a Saturday afternoon. It's because so many of you are listening in, and I get such a big kick out of the fact that when I go to New York or I go to New Jersey or Connecticut or sometimes Chicago, people come up to me and they say, I listen to the More Money Show every week. And I love that. It just makes my day. I think this is, for me, the best 2 hours of the week. I love being in front of this microphone. I love listening to you. By the way, I will not be taking your calls today, only because we just don't have enough time today because there's so much going on with the markets. I wonder how nervous you are. It's been up and down and up and down and up and down. And it's hard to kind of explain why the market goes through these gyrations. But I'm here to tell you, I'm going to give you just one hint. And that is, when the market falls, buy the dips. I really believe that's a good strategy. And I'm not a financial genius. I'm an economist. But if you buy the dips, and especially if you buy the dips and then just hold on to the stock, don't try to day trade. Don't try to time the market, but just if the market goes down, that's maybe an opportunity to get more of these stocks, because when the market goes down by 50%, you get to buy twice as much of the stock. You get twice as much ownership. And if the market goes back on its merry way, which it will do, that's been the whole history of the United States stock market for the last 200 years, then you're going to do very well with your market, with your money. That is to say, if you're holding on to the stock for more than 5 or 10 years, buy these stocks low and sell them high when they appreciate in value. Now, there's so much to talk about. Obviously, the tariff talk has really dominated the discussion for the last couple of weeks. And I want to explain to you the Trump strategy here, because it makes a lot of sense to me. Trump gave that very famous declaration earlier this week where he said that he was going to go to 10% tariffs on everybody. So he's going to suspend the tariffs for 90 days and then 10% on everyone except for China. And for China, he is going to impose very high tariffs. Now, I happen to agree with this strategy, folks. I think China is the new evil empire. I think they are dangerous. I think they cheat, they steal, they take our technologies. They don't play by the rules. They look like they're going to try to invade Taiwan, which I think would be a disaster for the whole world economy. And it would be a disaster for peace. And so I do think we have to give them a little spanking. And this is more than a little spanking. It's basically say, if you're not going to act like a civilized country and you're not going to play by the rules, we're going to hit you hard. And I like this strategy because I think it's a strategy we can win. What has not been reported very often in the press is that, yes, our market is down, but China is getting hit even harder. And China cannot continue with this down this road, or their entire economy will collapse. And that's especially true if China continues to try to retaliate. They cannot win a tit for tat war with the United States. It's impossible. China's economy is still less than half as large as ours is. Their financial markets are only 20% as large as ours are, and their financial markets are getting killed. And they're going to have massive unemployment. They're going to have incredible political unrest if this continues. So Trump is going to drag them and drive them back to the bargaining table, where they're going to have to start acting like a civilized country again. And they're going to have to play by the rules. And we're not going to allow them to be engaged in these predatory practices that are hurting our businesses and our workers. It's that simple. And I'm a free trade guy. You know that. For those of you who've listened to this show over the last 3 or 4 years, know that I believe that free trade is one of the, as my buddy Art Laffer would say, and he's going to be on the show later, that free trade is one of the pillars of prosperity. We've benefited greatly as a nation by being a free trade country. And incidentally, the United States of America, the 50 states that make up our great country, we are one large, massive free trade zone. South Dakota can't put a trade on Montana, and South Carolina can't put a tariff on goods and services coming in from North Carolina, and that has produced this amazing prosperity that America has, that has led us to become the economic superpower. So just as trade among our states is a good thing, when we trade with Mexico or Canada or other countries, it's mutually beneficial. This is what economics is all about. The whole basis of economics is trade. If I make sandwiches and you make cake, I'm going to give you a sandwich, you're going to give me a piece of cake, and we're going to both be better off. That's just the freedom to exchange, and that's what free trade is. But we cannot go forward, and Trump has taught me this. If these other countries are charging tariffs 3 or 4 times higher than ours, sorry, that's not free trade. It's not fair trade, and we're not going to allow it. We're not. In other words, what Trump is saying with these reciprocal tariffs is, if you come in and punch me in the nose, maybe the Bible says I should turn the other cheek, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to punch you right back in the nose. That's called tit for tat. And by the way, there have been very famous books that have been written that tit for tat is the single best approach to negotiating. And America can do that better than anyone else, because these other countries can't keep titting for tatting, or else they go broke before we do. And so this is the new America. This is the new philosophy of Trump. Now, the financial markets don't like it a lot. They'd like to just, return to the old system, but that doesn't work for us anymore, folks. It doesn't work. We're setting some new rules, and we're going to enforce this with our economic might and our economic muscle. And if these other countries don't like it, there's a very easy solution. If Britain doesn't like it, if Germany doesn't like it, if France doesn't like it, if Canada doesn't like it, if Mexico doesn't like it, guess what, guys? All you have to do is lower your tariffs to our level, and we'll both be better off. Just play by the rules. And as a free trader, I see a lot of wisdom of that. And in the end of the day, at the end of the day, I don't know if that's going to be within 3 months or 6 months or a year. Maybe it might take 2 years. Trump will win. He will win this fight. They cannot win this fight, and Trump will not back down. I've known Trump very well for 8, 9 years now. This guy does not back down. And I hope that President Xi understands that. I hope the Prime Minister of England understands that. They've got to get on the phone. The leaders of these countries, they got to pick up the phone, call Donald Trump and say, okay, I'm ready to make a deal. And that deal is going to be that they're going to lower their tariffs on our agriculture, our lumber, our technology products, the most amazing things that we make in America, and our manufacturing goods and services. We're going to force them to lower their tariffs. That's going to create more jobs in America. It's going to bring, for the foreigners, it's going to mean they have access to lower price products, because when you reduce the tariff, prices go down. And so everybody's better off. In other words, what Trump is talking about is a new scenario of trade that is a win-win-win for everybody. Maybe the only country that doesn't win is China, because they've cheated and stolen our technology, and they'd like to continue to go along with that and continue to do it. And we're saying, no, we're not going to take it anymore. We are not going to take it anymore. That's a Who song, and it is absolutely the truth. So that's the way this is going to turn out. It is going to turn out okay, folks. And again, I don't know when it's going to turn out okay. This tirade that the European nations are having and the investors are having, that may last for a few months. But this is a moment of crisis, but a moment of great opportunity for a country. That's the way I see it. And I would not bet against Donald Trump winning. If you bet against Trump winning, the odds are against you. Now, he may not win, but I think he will. And he has proven over and over that he is a winner. He knows the art of the deal. And by the way, there's also this book called The Art of War. And that tells you the same thing. You don't back down. You don't tell your opponents what you're going to do. You keep them off balance. That's exactly what Trump is doing. And I, for one, am very much in Trump's corner on this. I want them to come to a very quick resolution, but I think he's going to win. Now, the other big story this week is the tax bill. And we're going to talk about this throughout the course of the next 2 hours, but there was progress. It was important progress. Thank God for Mike Johnson, our Speaker of the House, who's done an amazing job herding these cats, getting to 280 votes. He got it done once again by 1 or 2 votes in the House, but they did it. We're moving closer to the tax bill that would make all of Trump's tax cuts permanent, including the lower tax rates, including the small business tax cuts, including the doubling of the standard deduction, including the fact that we took half of the families off of the death tax so they don't have to comply with that awful, evil tax called the death tax. We did all these things, and they're going to be made permanent. The only real question is, will Democrats vote for this? Will Democrats vote for this, or will they vote for a $4 trillion tax increase? I find it so financially irresponsible that Democrats would say, we're okay with the taxes going up by $4 trillion, because I think most of you know, if we don't get this bill passed by December 31st, 2025, before the stroke of midnight and the ball comes down in Times Square, if that doesn't happen, then we have this massive tax increase. And Democrats are saying, okay, we're fine with that. We're fine with the average family paying $3,000 a year more taxes. I'm not fine with that. You're not fine with that, but apparently they are. So a lot to talk about this afternoon. I want to talk a little bit about the new inflation numbers. They came in. They were very good. Some of the bad signs, gold prices are up. So we got to talk about how that works out in terms of how that affects the economy. But don't panic. Come down from the ledge. I'm going to take your hand and I'm going to pull you down, because things are going to be just fine. By the way, we had the single biggest point day in the Dow ever earlier this week, and that was an amazing comeback, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those in the weeks ahead. This is the More Money Show on WABC, and we will be right back.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Hello, Nigel here. As an owl, I love to be awake all night, but allergy sufferers like you probably don't feel the same. So take Xyzal at night to relieve allergies while you sleep. Then wake up fully refreshed for a more productive day. Xyzal works fast and offers 24-hour continuous relief from sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat, so you can enjoy doing the things you love all day long. Be wise all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC and other affiliated stations throughout the country. Now I am very privileged and honored to have my mentor, Arthur Laffer, the most famous economist in the world. And that is true, by the way. He is the most famous economist in the world and one of the smartest economists in the world. Although Larry Kudlow is a pretty smart guy, too. Arthur Laffer, thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure, Steve, and thank you for the compliments. My mom would have actually believed you if she'd heard you say that stuff.
And you deserve the Nobel Prize, and I think you're going to get it this year. I think this is your year.
This is my year. Okay, 85 years old. I'll be able to enjoy it for a week.
So let's get right down to it. Let's start with this, that you and a very famous other guy named Steve Moore had a piece in the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday that seemed to really change things a little bit in terms of how the White House was approaching the tariff issue. And in that article, you and I recommended that Trump offers zero tariffs for other countries if they would go to zero on us. And what do you think about that and the events?
Well, I think it's amazing. I think this has been behind Trump's ideas all the way along, although obviously he can't discuss it with people what his fallback position is, obviously, or else it doesn't work. But I think he's been a free trader all of his life, to be honest. And, he found it really unpleasant that all these other countries have much higher tariffs and quotas and non-tariff barriers against us. And It was just improper, and there was no way of getting them to reduce it unless you threaten the living hell out of them. And that's exactly what he did. And I think right now there's a very good chance that the success will be a lot lower tariffs and a lot lower trade barriers and a lot freer trade in the world and a lot more prosperity and a lot less war.
So you're bullish.
I'm really bullish. And, look, it can always go sideways. And if it goes sideways, it's really terrible. I mean, as you know, the Smoot-Hawley tariff, the Nixon 10% import surcharge, and I could go on and on, really hurt the economy. And also on the other side of it, I mean, the Kennedy round tariff negotiations led to a huge boom called the Go-Go 60s. Reagan's thing with NAFTA and Clinton's thing with NAFTA led to a huge bull market and a great prosperity and peace in the world. So it works both directions. And if Trump does it right, we're going to have the greatest boom ever with peace.
And so Trump is now saying, I want your advice about China, because it sounds like Trump is sort of trying to isolate China economically. He basically is putting much higher tariffs on China than these other nations. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think he's trying to do that specifically. I think China's been the worst performer in the world. And that puts them out there alone. And also China has a lot of other bad actions that it's been taking.
Hold on. Just
tariffs.
When you said the worst performer, you mean their stock market, or what do you mean?
No. I meant their tariffs. They have a lot of protectionist legislation in China. Okay. They protect all the industries there. They have a lot of non-tariff barriers. They steal trade.
Are they worse than
I
Japan?
could go on and on. It's a race.
Even worse than yeah.
Okay, it's a race. Japan is really pretty bad on that stuff too.
I know,
but I think China's bad in addition to that on the Taiwan issue and a lot of other issues there that we have real conflicts with them. And I think Trump is using his leverage with China to get them to come back and become part of the family of nations. And, I think Trump really honestly does like Xi, and I think Xi does really like Trump. And there's nothing that would be better for the world than a peaceful, pro-growth, prosperous China, not belligerent, not trying to attack everyone, not trying to steal stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's a good chance that China joins with us and becomes a much better nation as a result of Trump's policies. 100 years from now, Steve, China will exist. And 100 years from now, the U.S. will exist. Why not have peace and prosperity in that 100-year period? Let's just try it. And then, they're the perfect trading partner for us. On comparative advantage terms, I can't think of any country that would match more to make America prosperous and make themselves prosperous than China.
So, this is an interesting point you're making, Arthur, because the history. I mean, you've taught a lot of this to me, that in the 1980s and 1990s and through the early 2000s, China was on a freedom march towards freedom, and both economically and politically. And then they sort of reversed course and they reverted back to communism and government central control. So it seems to me they're going to have to choose one path or another. We learned from the Soviet Union that central planning doesn't work very well. So how do you see this playing out in terms of Beijing?
Well, let me just say that in 1970, I was the first American in modern times, mind you, that went to China. I went with George Shultz and John Ehrlichman on Air Force Two.
What year was
that? And I was the only staffer, George Shultz and John Ehrlichman and their wives. And I was the only staffer there. We had a secretary, Jana Haruska, and a guy who paid the bills and stuff, Todd Hullen, who was our advance man. And that was it. I mean, that was the whole group. And I went in there cross-armed thinking I was going to hate China, thinking of the Korean War and all that. And I fell in love with China. And there's nothing that would be better than matching China with us. And they did do an amazing supply-side revolution. They cut taxes incredibly in China, denationalized the industries and all that. They locked their yuan to the U.S. dollar. They outsourced monetary policy to Alan Greenspan, and they went free trade, and they grew way more. I think they grew 60-fold, Steve, in real GDP per adult. And, you know, now with Xi, they have fallen back. They've gone back a little bit, and, you know, it's sad, but they can come back again. And if we encourage them, if we trade with them, if we act nicely to them and ask them to reciprocate, they've got to stop this stuff with Taiwan. They've just got to.
Yeah.
And they've got to stop this other stuff around the world, like the Panama Canal stuff. And Trump has called them on all those. But if they came in and had a serious negotiation, I mean, a serious long negotiation with Trump and team, I think we could develop a tremendous friendship and trading partner with China. And that would really de-escalate all of these hostilities and war threats. It would be super for the world. I'd love to see the world working without a major threat of a war. I just would love it. And he's going to take care of Ukraine and Russia. Trump is. He's going to take care of the Middle East really well, with the Houthis especially. And all of that's going to lead us to a really, peace and strength.
So that's a great outlook, and I think that could very well happen. I hope it does, because I think.
Well, I hope so too, Steve. I mean,
real prosperity.
As you know, I'm not nearly as good forecasting the future as I am the past. I'm really good in the past.
You're really good at that. All right.
Yeah,
so
but the future is a little difficult.
Now, I want to change subject because we only got a few minutes left. I'm talking to, of course, the great economist Arthur B. Laffer. The tax bill, they passed the tax bill now out of the House and the Senate. It looks like we're moving well ahead. We want to get that done as quickly as possible. What is your take on the tax bill at this point, and why is it important?
Well, the tax bill is really important. My take on it is I get all of my take on it from you, Steve. I mean, you follow this stuff really carefully, and I haven't followed it and I haven't done it. I just assume it's going to be passed because you're working on it and you're negotiating with them and you're doing it. My take on it on the economic side is it will remove a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to happen to taxes on December 31st this year. That's going to do, and especially on the death tax. The death tax, depreciation, and also the personal income tax. Now, the corporate tax rate's going to stay at 21. I would love to see that bill passed and continue with the very pro-growth policies that Trump put in his first term. And that's what I really want to see and think we should have. And you assure me it's going to make it through, and I'm really pleased with that prospect, to be honest. Really important.
Okay, so there is a little bit of a curveball, though, here, and that is that we're now hearing from some Republicans, and I'm not going to mention names, but some Republicans with some influence are now saying they want to raise the highest income tax rate, which you taught me is a really bad idea. And so right now, the top rate is 37%. They're talking about maybe 41%, but that's not even going to raise revenue, is it?
No, in fact, every single time in the history of the whole income tax, and that's my book with Brian Dimitrovic and Gene Sinkfield, for the whole history, every time we've raised the highest marginal income tax rate, the economy has underperformed, tax revenues have gone down, and the poor have been hammered. And that's not something Trump will stand for, and that's not something you and I will either.
Well, explain to people, because that doesn't seem entirely intuitive, because you would think if you're going to sock it to the rich, then only the rich are going to be hurt. You're saying the poor get hurt.
Well, you know, the rich hire lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, favor grabbers, politicians. You heard now that they're going to require all congressmen to wear barcodes so that we all know just exactly how much each one costs.
No. I love that idea.
Now, and of course, rich people have the means and the ways to be able to circumvent taxes. If you get taxes low enough for them, they'll pay their taxes fair and square. They're Americans just like all the rest of us if they do that. If you try to take the money from them and cheat them, they're going to hire this and get around it. And they have more money than we do to pay them off. And so every time we've raised tax rates on the rich, these people have raised their sheltering and done all that and paid a lot less in taxes. Believe me when I tell you that you've reported those numbers year in, year out, Steve, every year. The percentage of total taxes paid by the top 1% is I think it's 40% or 42% or something.
42, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big number, and you don't think they don't think they can get around it. Of course they can. You need to make the tax codes basically voluntary. If it's not voluntary, people are going to fight you every inch of the way, and that's not what's good for the economy.
So this idea of a 42% rate I agree with you. I think it would do great damage. And say that point again, because it's so important. By the way, the book, you neglected to mention the name of the book. It's called Taxes Have Consequences, right? Taxes Have Consequences?
That's Taxes Have Consequences. Laffer, Sinkfield, and Dimitrovic. And it's it's doing really well, by the way, but it's a complete history of the U.S. income tax by period. It's fun to read. It's not a book that you read from cover to cover, by the way. It's not a good suspenseful, but you can cover any of those periods in there with great detail, the speeches, the stuff, what the shelters were. Chapter 2 has all the tax shelters that people have used historically. People are really clever when they can figure out tax shelters and stuff. And, and they can hire those lawyers. So that's what happens, Steve. And it would be very silly of Congress to try to raise the highest tax rate. It should, if anything, be made down to where Reagan had it at 28% and just leave it there.
So one last question for you on the way out. This is the great Arthur Laffer, and that is this. So Steve Forbes and I had a piece that we wrote recently where we said, why don't we just go to 15% on everything? A 15% flat tariff on things coming in, a 15% income tax, a 15% corporate tax, a 15% capital gains tax, a 15% death tax, just 15% across the board. What do you think?
I love it. Now, I did that one for, remember I was Jerry Brown's economist when he ran for president in 92? Yeah. And he had 13% on all of those. 13, so you're right in there with Jerry Brown. Now, he had two taxes. He had got rid of every federal tax, every single one except for the sin taxes. And we had a 13% tax on value added and a 13% tax on gross income, gross unadjusted income. And that was it. And that would have included the death tax and all of that you mentioned. Tariffs, it would include the corporate. It would include all those together. And that makes perfect sense to me. Congratulations. And it's great. And if Jerry Brown could get a little bit younger quicker, we could run him again and win.
So we have this is the 50-year anniversary of the Laffer curve. And by the way, there's Arthur, I think you'll get a kick out of it. There's a Broadway show that is really hot in Times Square called Real Women Have Curves. And I thought, well, maybe we should make a poster. Real men have curves because you've got your own curve yourself.
Oh, Jesus. So, Steve Moore. Steve.
Anyway.
Oh, my God.
I want people to know, Arthur, that we're taking it on the road. You're coming to Palm Beach, and then we're doing something in Washington, D.C. We're going to go up to New York. So we want people to participate in that. Really, this is the curve that really changed the world. And congratulations to you. And was it really written on a napkin?
It was written on a napkin. Now, it wasn't written on the napkin first. I did it in my classes there, but I did do it on a napkin with Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. And that was with Jerry Ford's Whip Inflation Now program, how they weren't going to collect 5% more revenues with a 5% surcharge. They may collect 4% more, but not 5%. They may even lose revenues. And, of course, then I drew that curve on the napkin for them. And, lo and behold, it's so obvious. Yeah. And I didn't develop this. It's not my curve, by the way. That was Jude Winisky named it. Well, it's been around for 1,000 years at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I used it when back then the world was so Keynesian back then that no one even thought of it.
I know.
No one even thought of that.
It is amazing.
It is.
Arthur Laffer, you are a legend. You are going to win the Nobel Prize in 2025, and thank you for all that you do for freedom and prosperity. This is WABC. This is the More Money Show, and we'll be right back.
So good, so good, so good.
Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs?
Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good.
Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes, my gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC and other affiliates throughout the country. Thanks so much for joining in on this tumultuous week with the stock market. And I was trying to think who knows more about the value of our financial institutions and can give us good advice. I can't think of anybody better than Rob Arnott. Rob's been on the show many times before. You know Rob as the chairman of the board of research affiliates. He's the author of many books and studies and has been one of the most successful investors I know. So Rob, thanks so much for joining this week.
It's a real privilege. How are you doing?
Thank you. I don't know how I'm doing. One day I feel great. The next day, not so good. It's been a tumultuous week. And I think people are looking back, trying to, people are getting a little motion sickness watching the market. Have you ever seen anything like this? Well, you probably have.
Well, yeah, absolutely. During the global financial crisis, during the COVID mess, during the aftermath of the dot-com bubble, tumult in the markets is rare, but it happens. It's perfectly normal.
Why does it happen? Why does it happen?
Surprise. When the dot-com bubble burst, people thought the tech stocks were going to keep going to the moon. And when the global financial crisis hit, people thought that the financial system was going to crumble, and it didn't. When the COVID crash happened, people thought this is going to kill scores of millions of people all over the world, and it didn't, although it did kill a lot. And what you have here is tariffs, and the thought was tariffs are going to destroy the world's economy. No, they won't. I was candidly quite surprised that the market was so surprised.
Yeah, you were telling me that when we were talking off the air, Rob, that hey, you're surprised that everyone is so surprised. I kind of agree with that. I mean, look, Donald Trump, when he ran for president, he said his favorite word was tariff. So that should have probably been a tip-off that he was going to go forward with this agenda. Why is the market surprised?
Well, he even talked about the magnitude. I think the market was surprised because he's had practice in recent weeks of threatening a tariff and on the verge of imposing the tariff, backing off. Right. And this go around, I think the thinking was, okay, Wednesday's going to come and he's going to either not do what he's threatening, or he's going to do it on a smaller scale. And he didn't. He did it on the scale that he had in mind that he'd been talking about. That took everyone by surprise.
That's right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you.
Yeah.
I mean, so people are afraid right now. They're trying to figure out what to do. We look at our 401ks and we see that, one day it's up, the next day it's down. So what is the best strategy if you're just a casual investor? You maybe have your retirement fund in the markets. What do you do?
Well, firstly, I wrote a paper in 1993 with one of my favorite co-authors, a guy named Peter Bernstein, brilliant man, sadly passed in 2009. But in any event, he and I wrote a paper entitled Bull Market, Bear Market, Who Cares? And the point of the paper was you don't need a particular value for your 401k or your pension or your brokerage account. You need an ability to fund long-term spending.
Right.
And the long-term spending that a portfolio can sustain doesn't change much from day to day. The income stream that your 401k is going to produce isn't much different from what it was a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. Bull markets are good if what you're planning to do is withdraw the money and spend it right away, because then it's worth more and you can spend more. If you're planning to spend money from your portfolio 20 years from now, you should be hoping for a bear market so you can buy more at lower prices and have more of an income stream 20 years from now. So ironically, people shouldn't be rooting for a bull or a bear market, except if they plan to spend now or if they plan to spend many, many years from now. And in the former case, you should be hoping for a bull market. In the latter case, you should be hoping for a bear market. But
so
anyway,
sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that because I think most people who are listening to this show, although we have a more elderly audience, but we have a lot of young people too. So if you're a young person, you probably want to buy more stock in a bear market because you're going to hold on to it for a long time and you're probably going to see a higher return.
It's called dollar cost averaging.
Right.
And if a market's down 50% and the income stream, the dividend stream of the stock market hasn't changed, then you're able to buy twice as much in future income stream with every $100 you invest than you could before the market fell. So people don't think that way. It goes against human nature.
And so now we have a situation where, well, first of all, you and I have known each other a long time. You're pretty libertarian, I think. Is it safe to say in terms of your political orientation? Right. So
absolutely.
You probably aren't a big fan of tariffs.
I think the ideal tariff rate is 0, except when it's a geopolitical.
Well, our Laffer and I just had a piece in the Wall Street Journal arguing for that just the other day, so we agree with you. Now, let me ask you a strategic question. It's not a finance question. It's just, so if we have low tariffs and other countries have high tariffs. Now, Milton Friedman, who I knew, you may have known Milton, he used to say, well, if other countries are going to impose tariffs on us, we should just that they're just hurting themselves. We should still have free trade. Trump is saying we have to have reciprocal tariffs. Where do you fall on that?
I lean more in the direction of Milton Friedman, but I'm not sure Trump disagrees all that much with Uncle Milty. Trump, back in 2019, I think it was, at a G7 meeting, said to other members of the G7, look, you want 0 tariffs, give us 0 tariffs, we'll give you 0 tariffs. And so assuming that he still feels that way, then he's kind of a closet libertarian in terms of his end goal. I think he made 2 strategic blunders last Wednesday. One, he didn't say what he was going to do with the revenues. Now, if he'd said, By the way, we're going to pair these big, beautiful tariffs with a big, beautiful tax cut. I want to see the corporate rate down to 15. I want to see the personal rate down to 30. Then people would have said, okay, so he's got something useful to do with the money. Great. But he didn't say that.
Although he has, hold on just for a second. He has sort of hinted at that. He hasn't said it directly, but, he has said, look, I want to have, a lower tax on things that are produced in the United States and a higher tax through a tariff on things that come into the United States. So that, that's sort of the framework that he said. He says he wants 15% on things that are made in America. So that could be a good way to offset the tariff.
Right. So that's exactly right, but he didn't say it. And the other thing that I think was a little bit of a strategic blunder is he didn't talk about his end goal. He talked about big, beautiful tariffs, but he didn't talk about, well, gosh, if our trade counterparties get rid of their tariffs, I'm perfectly happy to have zero tariffs with geopolitical allies and friends of the country. I'm not going to have zero tariffs with geopolitical adversaries who are saber rattling and are a threat. And if he'd said that, but then again, his Bible is the book Art of War, written 2,500 years ago. In Art of War, many of the precepts are ones that he follows very carefully, very assiduously, like surprise your enemy, like don't tell people what you're planning to do, like the best war is one in which you win without firing a shot. And threatening.
By the way, hold on, Rob. Let me just say something. What you're describing is somewhat similar to a very similar book called The Art of the Deal, which Trump, he is a pretty good negotiator, as I've seen. And I think some of those lessons you learned from The Art of War are very similar to the lessons that I learned from reading The Art of the Deal.
Yeah, and the inspiration for the title "Art of the Deal" was Art of War.
I didn't know that.
Remember the name of the author.
Oh, that's cool.
Trying to remember the name of the author of Art of War, but anyway, Chinese book. And you can count on it that every member of the Chinese Politburo has studied Art of War closely, if not memorized it. And you can count on it that 99% of the people of the power elite in Washington and the quarters of power in Europe have not, even though they know that it's Trump's Bible. Why the heck don't they take it's a short book. It'd take 3-4 hours to read it. Why not take the 3 or 4 hours, read the damn book and have a better sense of what to expect from this guy?
Yeah. Well, great points. Now, I wanted to just ask you before I leave this subject, because there's something else I want to talk to you about. By the way, I'm talking to Rob Arnott from Research Associates, and really one of the primary premier investment gurus, just kind of walking us through what's happened with these markets. So what do you do now? I mean, what are you doing, Rob? Are you advising people sit pat, or because everybody's nervous?
Yeah, well, firstly, a 10% market move isn't a big deal in the long-term scheme of things.
That's true.
It feels like a big deal when it happens, especially if it happens in a day. But it doesn't change your wealth or your future spending ability in any material way. And so the first thing is calm down. Don't panic. Look at your investments from a long-term perspective. When you get tumult in the markets, there's sometimes if there's a market crash, and I would describe those 2.5 days as a crash. But if you get a market crash, you're going to take no prisoners. But after the crash happens, there's a sorting out process. Things that were already cheap U.S. small cap value was already cheap. Things that were already cheap are now cheaper. Right. And so the high likelihood is that there's a sorting out process in which what is now newly cheaper recovers handily, and what was already expensive before the crash and is still expensive after the crash winds up not rebounding so well. So I think that we're likely to see a sorting out process in the weeks and months ahead in which, well, firstly, what is cheap? Non-U.S. stocks are cheap. There's a reason for that. American exceptionalism has been real. Yep. But at the same time, does that justify a 2x multiple on U.S. versus Europe or U.S. versus emerging markets? I don't think so. I think it justifies a differential, but not a 2x differential.
Well, Rob,
and so, yeah.
Sorry, just we've got literally 30 seconds left. So tell us, you can finish your sentence. Sorry to interrupt you, but we've got a hard break coming up.
Sure. Basically, I would buy what's newly cheaper, non-U.S. stocks, emerging market stocks, small cap value stocks in the U.S. Russell 2000 value is very cheap. This is an opportunity to rebalance and pivot into what's newly cheap.
Oh, by the way, on the way out, Rob, just literally in 60 seconds, can you summarize this new study that you've just put out called "Stimulus Does Not Stimulate"? I love that study. We're going to highlight in our hotline, but give us the Cliff Notes version of that study.
Well, super Cliff Notes version is everyone talks about stimulus. Everyone talks about government following a pro-growth policy, by which they mean more spending to stimulate more growth. No,
it doesn't work.
Government spending detracts from growth, and it detracts from growth for a very simple reason. There's a lot of people in government who are serious, hardworking, passionate about what they do. There's a lot who aren't. There's not a lot of accountability. There's not a lot of upside for doing fabulous work, and there's hardly any downside for doing miserable work.
Well, Rob. That's how government works. So you've just confirmed we all have believed this true. Rob Arnott, thanks so much for joining. That's Rob Arnott, who is one of the top investment advisors in the country and has been extraordinarily successful. So please take his advice, folks. This is the More Money Show. We will be right back.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the second hour of the More Money Show, and I appreciate so much you all tuning in on this Saturday afternoon. So much going on in these financial markets. We talked a lot about it in the first hour, but I want to bring up a few other issues that we haven't touched on yet. Let's go through this quickly. One of the things that worries me, and one of the reasons I think the stock market took a bit of a tumble this week, earlier in the week, was that Republicans, I cannot believe this. I can't believe I'm even saying this, but Republicans, and I'm a Republican. I'm not a rah-rah Republican. I don't think Republicans walk on water by any means. I think they create a lot of the problems that we have in this country and are co-conspirators with the Democrats way too often. So I never apologize for the Republican Party. I think if anything, they're just the worst of two evils. But what is happening now is that there are some Republicans in Washington, and I'm not going to mention their names, but influential Republicans, people with political clout, are saying that we have to raise the highest income tax rate in this country. Say what? I mean, raise the income tax rate? That's not why Republicans are put on this planet. Republicans are supposed to be cutting tax rates, not raising them. And shame, shame, shame on any of these Republicans say, oh, I can go for a higher tax rate on the rich. I mean, sometimes the Republicans start listening. I don't know. Are they going to Bernie Sanders rallies lately, and they're picking up this idea the rich don't pay their fair share? The richest 1% pay almost half the income tax in this country. 1 out of 100 Americans pay half the income tax. And now we've got Republicans saying they're not paying enough. Now, that's one thing. It's just absurd to say that the rich aren't paying their fair share. The second thing is, Art Laffer says this all of the time, that when you raise taxes on the rich, the poor get hit hard. And that's because the rich find ways around paying the taxes. Either they don't work, they don't expand their business, they move somewhere else. People in New York certainly understand this. New York City and New York State have the highest taxes in the country. And guess what? People move out. Same thing with New Jersey. They move out. Where do they go? They go to places where taxes are lower. They go to Texas. They go to Florida. They go to Utah. They go to Tennessee. So this is not rocket science. If you raise taxes, people will change their behavior. As my buddy Larry Kudlow, who's on before this show, always says, if you tax something, you get less of it. And if you tax something less, you get more of it. So when you tax the activity of rich people, they're going to just find ways to dodge these taxes. They're going to hire tax accountants. They're going to hire lawyers. They're going to move. They're going to work less. They're going to maybe even in some cases give up the U.S. citizenship, move to Ireland or something that has lower taxes. We know this because as Laffer's new book that just came out recently called Taxes Have Consequences, it proves this without a shadow of a doubt that every time in America we have raised tax rates, the economy gets worse. The rich end up actually paying a smaller share of the taxes. And who gets clobbered but working class and lower income Americans? It does not work. It's like saying, gee, I wonder what happens when the clock strikes midnight. Is there going to be a clanging on the bell? Yes. Just as obvious and certain as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. If you raise tax on the rich, it's not going to work. It's going to damage our economy. So for those Republicans who are talking about raising the highest income tax rate to 40%, no, no, no. And incidentally, if the Republicans do this, I am going to withdraw any support for the Republican tax bill. I will not, well, I can't say I won't allow it because I can't stop it, but I will not endorse any tax bill that raises the highest income. I'm saying this, I've got my hand up. If I had a Bible here, I'd be putting my hand on the Bible. I don't have a Bible on my desk here, but this isn't something we cannot support. We have to support the simple concept of a broad tax base where everybody pays their fair share at a low tax rate for everyone. I hate the idea of progressive taxation. I think Trump is right, by the way. One of the biggest mistakes we ever made in our country was the passage of, I believe it was the 16th Amendment. Don't quote me on that. I think it was the 16th Amendment that created the income tax. We did not have an income tax for the first 125 years of our country. And then the liberals came along, the quote progressive. They created an income tax, and then they started stealing the money right from our wallets and right from our paychecks. And that's what's happened ever since. And Trump, God love him, he's saying well, maybe we should go back to the system where we just raise taxes from tariffs and land sales like we did for the first 125 years. And you don't have an income tax where the government literally takes the money out of your paycheck before you even get the paycheck. Did you know that? That's called withholding. They take the money from your payroll tax and your income tax and your state income tax. They take it right out of your paycheck. I remember an employer who had about 100 workers, they ran a little factory, told me, this was about 5 years ago, that he decided he wanted to show the workers how much money was being taken out of their paycheck and all these income taxes. So what he did is he would pay the workers at window A. You'd go up and he'd pay them the cash. He'd say, here's your $1,200 for your work this week, or whatever the number was. Let's say it was $1,200. And then he said, now you got to go to pick. So you'd have $1,200. You'd have $1,200 bills there. And then he'd say, okay, now you go to the second window and you pay your federal income tax. So now you give two $100 bills back to the guy behind that window. So now you don't have 1,200, you have 1,000. And then you go to the next window and you have to pay your payroll tax. That's another $200. So you take $200 back from that. Now you have $800. And then you have to pay your state income tax. Now you have to give $100. Now you only, in other words, all these people had to physically give the money back that they don't normally see because it's withheld from their paycheck. And I asked him, well, what happened with that? He said the workers were so angry. He said they were so angry at the government when they actually saw how much money the government takes out of your paycheck. And then I said, well, what happened next? And he said the federal government came in and said, you can't do that. You can't let people see how much taxes they're paying. And so they made it illegal for you to do that, where you pay people their gross pay and then they have to hand back the taxes because the government doesn't want you to know how much you pay in taxes. But I'm telling you, you're paying almost half of your income when you take all of the stuff that you have to pay, your sales taxes, your gas taxes, your state income taxes, your payroll taxes, your federal taxes, your this tax, that tax. It's amazing. You pay utility taxes. It's unbelievable how much taxes people pay. And the idea that the Republicans are going to raise tax rates now, I think, is outrageous. That's what Democrats are for. And by the way, why would Republicans do something that is going to do so much damage to our economy? We used to make fun of Biden saying, is he doing this intentionally to hurt our economy? And a lot of people think they were intentional. I don't think they were intentional. I just think they were stupid. But this would be intentional because Republicans know better and they would still do it. Why? To get people's votes, because they think soak the rich is popular. It's not popular. I'm not going along with it, folks. I will not allow it. Again, I keep saying I will not allow it. I can't stop it, but I will not endorse it. I will not put a good housekeeping seal of approval on any tax bill that raises tax rates. And one last point before we go to our break. Some of you may be old enough to remember what happened in 1990, during George H.W. Bush's presidency, right in the middle of his presidency. He decides that he's going to raise the income tax. And oh my God, we went crazy because remember, George H.W. Bush was the one at the Republican convention, which I believe was in Houston. He went on that stage and he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And then the first thing he did when he came into office was he raised taxes and he lost the election. That was the reason he lost the election in 1992, because people would not forgive him for lying to the American people about what he was going to do. Now, every single Republican in Congress, not all of them, but virtually all of them, have promised not to raise taxes. So if they do that, I think they deserve to lose. I do. I don't think they should be elected again. It's sort of like, when you're a kid, you learn that you don't put your finger in the electric socket or you might get, shocked, and you learn that pretty quickly. Well, the Republicans did stick their finger in that electric socket. They did get a big electrocution from that. They all lost their elections. And for the last 30 years, that was 1992, so that was a little over 30 years ago, Republicans said, we're not raising taxes anymore. And now we are with these Republicans saying, we may well do that. If they do it, I'm out. I am done with these people. It is a very serious danger. And please help us, folks. Please tell your congressman or senator, no tax rate increases. Your job is to flatten the rates, keep them low. Let's have the rate down as low as 15%. That's the solution, by the way, Steve Forbes and I have endorsed. How about this? 15% federal income tax rate, 15% corporate tax rate, 15% business tax rate, 15% capital gains rate, 15% dividend tax rate, 15% estate tax, 15% tariff. How about that? That's our federal system. Can you imagine if we could do that? The economy would be on fire right now if we did it. So how are we going to raise taxes by, to 40% when we should be lowering them to 15%. One other quick point I want to make, but two other quick points. We've only got 2 minutes left before we have to take a break. One is inflation is down. Trump has done it again. He did it again. I mean, he just keeps making these promises, and he keeps delivering. He promised he would bring inflation down in 6 months. He's brought them down in the first 3 months in office. It's just an incredible thing how he just, checks off the boxes, doing all these wonderful things. But one thing I am concerned about is the gold price is up. And that is a bad sign. I don't like a high gold price. And I think that's why that there is a lot of turmoil right now in Washington. The investors don't like it. And so when people see turmoil, they go to buy gold. We want to see the gold price falling, not rising. But I've always told folks, as part of your portfolio, you should have some gold as just a protection against these crazy politicians. I'll know the economy is turning around when I see that gold price migrating. Because remember, when you have gold at right now, it's I think $3,200 an ounce. It just about a few years ago, it was $1,800. So that's a gigantic increase in the price of gold. It's because people are nervous. They're worried about what's happening to our economy. They're worried about the fact that these guys can't come together and get this done in terms of, and they're worried about the deficit, which is now well over $2 trillion a year. So we got a lot of cleanup to do. It is going to happen. I'm still really bullish, folks. And as I said at the outset of the show, buy these dips. That's my investment advice. I'm not a great advisor. You're going to hear from Ryan and Bob Payne later in the show, who will give you some really good advice. But my simple-minded advice is every time you see a big stock market sell-off, like we've seen in some of the recent days, buy those dips because you're getting more stock for paying less money. Folks, we will be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC. You can tell I'm fired up. I'm going to be fired up throughout the next hour as we have some great guests coming up.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Now, I'm very pleased to have on the show David Bahnsen, who's one of the top Wall Street gurus of all time, a good friend of Unleash Prosperity. He's written several books, including No Such Thing. What is it? No Such Thing as a Free Lunch, David?
There's no free lunch.
No free lunch. And I love that. It comes right out of Milton Friedman. So it's such a busy week. You could get motion sickness this week watching the stock market, David. Give me your sense of how Trump is handling this. Do you agree with his policies? Do you think he's doing the right thing? As I read it, David, it looks to me like he's trying to sort of isolate China as the bad actor, and I kind of like that idea. But will that strategy work, and do you agree with it?
Well, the problem, Steve, is that you know how much I do agree with the president on, particularly when it came to that historical corporate tax reform bill in 2017, particularly when it comes to energy independence, when it comes to deregulation. So I think it's important for those of us who often agree with the president but sometimes don't to use that context, because so many people irrationally criticize everything he does or irrationally praise everything he does. And I want people to understand that I'm not coming at this from any kind of irrational perspective. It's just I want to call balls and strikes as an economist and as a student of financial markets.
And by the way, let me
to
just interrupt you for 1 second, David, because I love what you're saying, because my complaint with with Wall Street and the traders is they seem to be hyper obsessed with the tariff issue and not looking at all these amazing positive things that he's doing for the economy, the deregulation, the tax cut to come, the pro energy policies. And I don't know why that is, because if you look at everything in total, it's very pro investor, pro America.
But Steve, the thing is that, and I think you know this, and I know it's easy to say Wall Street and they, but who is Wall Street and who is they? It's financial markets that represent millions of people acting in their own self-interest.
Right. That's true.
And price discovery. You talked about my book. There's no free lunch. Price discovery is the heart of Friedrich Hayek and what we believe about a market economy. We need prices to act as signals and information for people to make decisions on. And markets give us access to prices. And what markets have been responding to since the Rose Garden ceremony is not that we might get extension of the Trump tax cuts. It's not that that was already priced in. Markets did respond to deregulation. They did respond to energy independence. Markets went up thousands of points after he was elected. Right. It's just that since then, they didn't see a lot of action on some of those things. And what they did see was not isolating China. What they saw was the president really make his efforts with China a lot harder by lumping in with that effort a war and trade on every other country. He had spent a couple of weeks saying it was going to be based on reciprocity. It was going to be based on fairness. And then lo and behold, Switzerland, who had no tariffs on us, was getting hit harder than other European countries that had higher tariffs. So that's really been a lot of the challenge in markets, is they're not getting a clear signal as to what the objective is.
So I agree with that totally. I think that that he has kind of gone after everybody at once, and it's never very smart to front a multi-front war. And I wish he had really honed in on the countries that are really abusive. And China, I mean, certainly Canada is not one of them. And there are some trade abuses, but they're one of our most important allies. But let me just ask you a question, by the way. I was thinking of this when you were talking. You were basically making the point that, of course, that markets are pretty rational. We believe that, and that you get, hundreds of millions of investors all over the world that are looking at what's happening, and they're making their decision about where to place their capital. And I was wondering, do you think, David, how influenced do you think investors are by the media? By the media portrayal of what's happening than the reality of what's happening?
Well, investors are generally human beings, and human beings are generally very influenced by their emotions, and the media is a master at manipulating emotions. Right. But the problem is, I want to be a little bit bipartisan here. I spent a few years watching Republicans say every single day the market went down, it was Biden's fault, or every time egg prices went up, it was Biden's fault. And so, I'm not exactly surprised that the media is trying to pile on President Trump. There's just partisanship all through the media, and it's the way the world works these days. But investors are not stupid. When you're talking about hedge funds and asset managers and investment banks and sovereign wealth funds, these are people that I trust to make financial decisions for their own money more than I trust the government to make financial decisions for our money, right? And I believe that what has happened is a very high degree of uncertainty, which is the worst thing that you can have in markets. So look, the China thing right now, I mean, whether they end up at 140% tariff from us and China's retaliated at 100%, those numbers went up and up throughout last week. And I think, Steve, I don't know where it's going to go next week, but they're not doing that to leave 100% tariffs on the two largest economic superpowers in the world. They're doing it to force someone's hand to a point of a deal.
That's true.
There's a lot of issues with China. President Trump is a deal maker. I get all of it. My criticism is not on trying to get a better deal with China. I'm for that outcome, but I don't believe the chaos and break things as a way of getting something done is not my preferred approach, because along the way, and this is something you know about, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity knows about, we can't delay the supply side of the economy. We need to be producing goods and services, and businesses right now are at a standstill.
So let me ask you another question related to this. So, I do some work at the Heritage Foundation, one of the most important conservative think tanks in America, if not the whole world. And they've been talking a lot, David, about a kind of decoupling from China. And of course, I think that's where Trump kind of wants to take us, is to decouple our economy as much as possible from China. And I'm not asking whether you support or oppose that policy. I'm asking, do you think it can, in other words, how big of a hit would our economy take if we went forward with this idea of just isolating China and almost embargoing their products? And again, I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. I'm just saying some people are arguing for this. Is it a rational policy? Can it work? How big of a hit would we take if we tried that?
It all depends, Steve, on how it were done. If you try to do it in what took 30 years to come together, and you try to undo it in 30 days, then you would devastate. And I mean devastate the economy.
Right.
Okay.
You have to ramp it down.
You have to ramp it down, and you also have to be honest with the American people. You and I are so critical when Joe Biden would mislead the American people about what was going on with inflation, what's going on with policy.
Right.
You can't say that by decoupling from China, you're bringing all the jobs to Ohio the next day. Okay.
Right.
We saw in the first Trump administration a lot of success in getting some modest decoupling out of China, about $40 billion a year. Every dollar of it went to Mexico, South Korea, Vietnam. You're going to reshore, but not onshore some of this. Now, some of it can be onshored if we get our tax and regulation policy right. Some of it can't be, okay? We can't make coffee in America. We can't make mangoes in America. We can't get chocolate the way we do from Switzerland, right? There's certain comparative advantages that I'm not giving up on, no matter how nice the populist lingo sounds some days. But with China, we can decouple, but you have to do it incrementally.
Right. Well, I've come to the conclusion that an incremental, retreat from China might be a good thing. I don't trust that country. I think they lie, they cheat, they steal. I think they're more and more a national security threat. And maybe it'd be good policy. We were trading with Japan up until practically the eve of World War II, when they dropped the bombs on Pearl Harbor. So and I'm a free trade guy. I know you are. I just was curious about what you thought about that. I don't see how China can. Well, let me put it like this. What Donald Trump would say is that they need us a lot more than we need them. Do you agree with that?
I agree in the way he means it, but I vehemently disagree in the way that matters.
Okay.
Because the American people have absolutely no tolerance for economic pain. And this idea that we can go give speeches, or that we can have right-wing tweets saying, hey, everyone, we got to suck it up, it's not going to happen. We don't tolerate inflation. We certainly don't tolerate a recession. The Chinese people do have more to lose than we do, but the Chinese people are used to losing.
Right.
And they have a political structure as an anti-democratic society that Xi isn't up for re-election next year, but 235 Republican congressmen are.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So it's a very different political reality, which is why incrementalism is a better way to do this than Leninism and some sort of just extreme revolutionary approach. Now, by the way, I want to sound crazy myself for a minute here, Steve. I don't want an incremental approach with China on national security issues. Any product that we rely on them to import, to export to us, that we need for national security, I want to address that immediately. But I'm referring to these things about shoelaces and certain plastic goods and other components that have helped create, disinflationary prices for consumers over the years, and Heritage's desire to decouple from that. That, I believe, has to be done incrementally. The economics
so David, we
of
just
it are
have a
such.
couple.
I was about to give the example. I have a
Right.
client who makes all the lightsabers for the Walt Disney Company. And they do just tons and tons of business, and they manufacture in China. And I said, how long would it take for you to move it? And he said, it's the IP is the problem. It's complicated digital technology that Vietnam can't do, that Arizona can't do, that Ohio, it would take a while to move it. So they want to move it, but it's going to take a little while. We have to have a plan for that, Steve.
So I'm talking to David Bahnsen, by the way, who you see David on Fox and Fox Business News all of the time. He's one of the top investment gurus in the country and is the author of No Such Thing as a Free Lunch. Two quick questions on the way out, David. First, I keep hearing all this talk about the bond vigilantes, and in fact, I've been getting texts all week about the bond vigilantes are trying to destroy the stock market and this and that. I don't quite know what that means, but I'm getting bombarded with these texts. What does that even mean? And can bond vigilantes destroy the market?
Well, I assure you, if you don't know what it means, the people saying it to you also don't know what it means. But what they're referring to is that the 10-year bond yield, which, by the way, a few weeks ago was at 4.5%, not hardly a very high number, and it dropped to about 3.8%, 3.85 in the low of all of this stuff that was happening because of assumptions that we were going to go into recession, downward expectations for growth, things like that. And then it did this week spike up a bit, and it had come down quickly to 3.9, and then it went up pretty quickly to 4.4, which is a whopping where it was 3 weeks ago number, okay? Not that big of a deal. And so the people saying, oh, it's bond vigilantes, those folks, the bond market is punishing the administration for all this uncertainty. Well, the more likely scenario for people who understand markets is that everybody had seen their stock portfolio drop 20 to 30%, and anyone who needed to raise cash was done selling stocks. They had to go start selling bonds. And this isn't, and people go, well, Mr. and Mrs. Smith can't move the market. That's right. But hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds. Now, do I think Japan was selling some bonds last week? I do. But that's not the bond vigilantes. The bond market is the greatest price discovery the world has ever seen. Trillions of dollars of highly liquid assets that reflect what people believe about America, period.
So final question on the way out, David Bahnsen. Investors are very nervous. I know my listeners call in and they're on the ledge right now. What advice do you give them, the mom and pop investor just trying to protect their 401k plan? What's the best strategy in this topsy-turvy market?
Well, last week after the Rose Garden, you had down 2,000, then down 3,000, then down more the Monday, Tuesday, and then you were up 3,000 when President Trump followed the advice of a certain friend of mine, Steve Moore and Art Laffer, publishing a wonderful piece in the Wall Street Journal about a 90-day pause to go work out deals with other countries. And then the market whipsawed higher. Then it goes lower the next day and so forth. There's a lot of volatility. The reason I bring all that up, Steve, is investors cannot think that they can time this, that they can go in and out of what's going to happen.
You can't time it.
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that President Trump knows exactly what he's going to do the next day. I know the markets don't know what's going to happen the next day. Therefore, you don't know what's going to happen the next day.
So what do we
do? You have to write it out. You have to write it out because people have gone through this before and through much worse things. Let's get a tax bill done. Let's extend the Trump tax cuts. Let's get on the other side of this trade deal, and people's portfolios will be fine.
David Bahnsen, you are a national asset. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This is the More Money Show, and we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show, and I'm now sitting with two of America's great iconic economists. I'm talking about, of course, the great Steve Forbes, who ran for president twice and really changed the world with both of those campaigns in terms of the flat tax and Social Security reform and all of the things that you talked about that you put on the map. And, of course, who are you again? Oh, yes, Arthur Laffer, the great economist who's worked for many, many presidential candidates and presidents, including Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy and Calvin Coolidge and all of them. So thanks so much for joining, gentlemen. Let's get right down to it.
You left out George Washington.
Did you work for George Washington?
But not George Bush. Just do not say George Bush.
So we're having fun with you today, folks. And I'm going to start with, some of the big news this week was consumer confidence fell to a low level. And there was a lot of confidence when Trump took office, but it seems to have hit a little downspin here. I'll start with you, Arthur. Is that something to be concerned about?
I don't know if it is or not really, but yeah. I love the phrase econ icon. Econ icon.
I'm gonna have to.
I can't econ icon. Can you? Econ icon.
Toy boat. Okay.
So, we're having some fun here.
We're trying.
I don't know about confidence here, but things are turmoil in the markets.
Yeah.
When you get markets up and down, you get people feeling ways.
Is it the tariffs?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's got the line up there. If you look at the five kingdoms, I think he's in really good shape on tax bills.
Yes.
I mean, it's obviously we need to get passed now and soon and all that. I think he's great on Doge, cutting spending. I mean, that's really terrific. I think sound money. I think he's going to try to go and get someone to replace Powell, who will be really
Could that
good.
be you?
Nope.
Could that be Larry Kudlow?
That could be
Could
Larry
that be
Kudlow.
Steve Forbes?
It could be Steve Forbes. The only one I know it couldn't be is me. It could be Kevin Warsh. There are a lot of good
people. Our friend Judy Shelton, we love
Judy Shelton. She's great. Bob Modell, we could use a Ouija board and get him back. And then I think regulatory policy is doing really well under this administration. I think we're going to be energy.
So you're bullish.
Oh, I'm quite bullish. And then I look at trade, and I'm not worried about trade like you guys are.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not afraid of bad trade policy.
Right.
I don't think it will happen.
Right.
That's why I'm not afraid. And that's where I am. So I'm looking, things look good.
Steve?
Things should be looking good. And when this thing shakes out, hopefully it will be good. Key thing is, how do these whole tariff things play out? Do they end up being a tax cut rather than a big tax increase?
Right.
What does it do to supply chains? That could gum those things up. We're already starting to see some impact there. So on the tax bill, the president's got to focus on getting a good bill through and fast. They talk about Memorial Day. That's almost too late. He should say, have it next Monday.
Yeah, so this is one of our...
And then maybe we'll get it a timely bill.
I couldn't agree more, and this is one of our top priorities, as you guys know, as co-founders of Unleash Prosperity with the great Larry Kudlow, that we want to get this tax cut done as quickly as possible. Something, Arthur, you've talked a lot about over recent months was a mistake that Ronald Reagan made. He didn't make many mistakes, but with respect to the tax bill.
The tax cuts, and very frankly, I mean,
Why did they do that?
Because they thought it would be good for getting the thing through the House. In fact, what Reagan told me on the phone call right after it passed was, you academics are all alike. How you don't understand politics. No one can vote for a big tax cut and get a big deficit the first time. You got to be worried about the budget and all that. And I asked him, I just said, excuse me, sir, I understand your situation and all that, but can I ask you a question? Fire away. I said, how much would you shop at a store a week before that store has its big discount sale? And he says, oh my God, how bad is it going to be? And I said, sir, it's going to be a barn burner.
Because I want to make sure our listeners and viewers understand. They did like 5% the first year, and then what was it again?
It was a 23% cut, really.
Yeah, right.
But 25% cut.
Yeah.
We had 1 quarter of 5%. Right. So that was 1.25% for 1981.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
No. Yeah. And then 1981, it was 1.25%, then it was 10% for 82. It was the 5% of 81 and half of the 10% for 82. So it was 10% across. And on January 1st, 1983, the tax cut was 20%. You got the full 10, the full 5, and half the last 10.
Right.
And that was the 20, and that's when the economy took off.
Yeah, right at the beginning of 83 was the big
day,
boom.
no, not the beginning. The first second.
Wow.
As soon as you could account that thing for January 1st, you won.
Steve, is that the way the world works, where people wait for that tax cut so they can really make more money? Is that how it works?
Taxes have consequences.
There's a great book called "Taxes Have Consequences."
just a coincidence.
So we don't want to repeat that mistake. We want to get it done quickly.
And the other thing though was we had a very tight monetary policy.
Yes, right.
And tight monetary policy. Let me ask you. This is something where maybe I'm disagreeing with you guys or not. If you told me,
we don't disagree with God.
With icons, we don't do that.
If you told me that there would be no inflation for the next 10 years. Okay, it's just done. There's no inflation for the next 10 years. Would the market go up or down? Would output go up or down?
Up.
Thank you. Why would putting Volcker in, who was going to get inflation down, cause the market to drop?
Well, because he just deflated.
No, there's no. You're doing. No? I think you're doing magical stuff.
Okay.
He brought inflation down. Yeah. That was not what caused the crash in 81, 82. It was the delay of the tax cut. And if we hadn't had the delay, you'd have seen a takeoff of unbelievable proportions.
So let me ask you, Steve.
So the bottom line is, we need a big, beautiful tax cut bill that takes effect not now, but last January 20th.
Yes, that's a really important.
You can't retroactively change your output. You can't do that either.
No, except if the companies anticipate the tax cut, they'll change their behavior now, won't they?
No.
No?
Anyway, sooner is better.
You need reward.
Okay. You're nitpicking. You're a nitpicker. Okay. So let's go back to let's go back to the monetary policy. I don't want to put what's your old joke? You talk about monetary policy and everybody scrambles away as quickly as they can. But but it is important, and I think a lot of our listeners and viewers are. What would if Steve Forbes were Fed chairman today? You wrote a piece about what's happened with the gold price. You're concerned about that. I am too.
I am too.
What would you be doing right now at the Fed to stabilize the economy and grow the economy?
Announce no more policy of depressing the economy to suppress inflation.
So they believe
stable value of the dollar.
They believe at the Fed that growth causes inflation.
They believe exactly.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Prosperity causes inflation.
Why?
And then because they have the idea if people are doing well, prices will go up, and that's inflation.
Oh my God!
It's not. It's a market at work.
Would you go right now? No. Let me ask you a serious question, because this is what I believe. I don't know the answer. Would you stabilize the gold price now if you were the Fed?
Yes.
How would you do it?
You would make the announcement that you're going to put it in a range so people don't get too
but how would you do it? Can they go out and buy gold?
Of course they can. They can look at the price and buy and sell bonds to try to keep the price in a certain range.
You do it the old British way. When the price of gold's rising, you sell bonds in the market, take money out of circulation.
What's wrong with that?
And no, that's the way Volcker did it.
So what's the consequence of that?
Consequences.
Stable prices.
Stable prices. Right. Guess what?
Right.
People know that they're not going to be bushwhacked by the Federal Reserve in the future. Takes that huge uncertainty out of the way. People talk about uncertainty about tariffs. The Fed is a constant source of uncertainty. What are they going to do, not do? And as a result, you look when we went off the gold standard, look at the amount of investment we had, not on the scale we had traditionally, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Yeah, the dollar is simply a means of doing transactions with each other.
But I still want to push you a little bit on specifically. Let's imagine you're running in New York, you ran the Fed and everything like that. You got gold sitting there at a price. Tell me how you would instruct the New York Open Market Committee to. What is the rule? Would you do it like Volcker?
You would say the gold's between, say, $2,900 and $3,100 an ounce. If it goes below 29, we take the monetary base down.
And increase the money? No.
And 3,100, you do the opposite. Yeah. So you try to keep within a range. And sometimes you may not have to do anything.
But when it hits 31, you'll take money out of circulation. You'll
let the markets know that the dollar is getting
bonds, you take base out of the system, and then at 2,900 you add base to the system.
Get it back.
Now, would you do it at today's price, for example?
Well, I'm not going to worry about the exact price. The key thing. The key
the
thing
starting
is
point doesn't matter.
It does, but his point is, in addition to what he's saying, really, what you're saying, it really matters.
We've come to the end of the More Money Show, but I wanted to just make a couple of quick observations on the way out. One of them is this, that I am an economist. I'm not a demographer. I'm not a social policy person. But this is just a question. And next week, when we take your calls again, I'm going to ask you this on the air. So spend the next week thinking about it and call in. And the question is, why is it that women are not having babies? It's not happening anywhere in the world. We are now facing a future with catastrophically low birth rates, especially in the Asian countries like China, Korea, Japan. I saw the other day that the average Korean woman is having her first child at the age of 34 or 35. You can't have a lot of children if your first child is at the age of 34, but we're seeing this in the United States as well. Women are waiting longer and longer to have children. And then the biological clock is ticking and they can't have as many kids. So we're less than 2 kids per couple. That's below the replacement level of fertility. I mean, if these birth rates stay this low, in 200 years, there are not going to be too many people left on the planet. It's just geometric numbers that they are falling, and it's happening all over the world. What is it? I don't understand. Some people say, well, women are more educated today, so they don't need to get married. But marriage and childbearing is the most important thing for our economy. We can't have an economy without people, folks. Now, we're going to have robots making a lot of things, but we need more babies. We need more babies. And I'm bad saying this. I don't have to give birth, but I don't understand why this trend is going on. And for the younger women to listen to this show, and for couples, come on, get going. It's fun. Making babies is a fun thing to do. So I don't understand why it isn't happening. And I fear that if our population declines, our prosperity is going to be put in great danger. Now, we have immigration. We can bring in people from the rest of the world. It's been one of the formulas for success. They have to come in legally, of course. But I don't understand it. Even Europe, France, Germany, Spain, these countries that are supposed to be advanced countries, the women are not having kids. I don't know if people aren't having sex anymore. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm here to tell you as an economist, it's a negative thing. So next week on the show, I want some women to call in and so the younger women, why are women not having children? It is one of the biggest problems that nobody is talking about, but we're not going to have a habitable planet if these continue, folks. So get going. This is Steve Moore. It's the More Money Show on WABC.